questions from the audience before you make the general comments, so you have them in your mind as you address it. If you're willing to try that, my question is, I'm concerned about public officials' comprehension of science. I'd love to see a show on a particular public issue that has a science solution. That's all. In your answers, you thinking of that. As moderator, back to you.
And actually, most recently, the topic of the paper that I turned my eye on was a paper that was purporting to support a race-based model of healthcare. And what I ended up discovering when I looked at this paper was that they were using a test that is widely used to uncover intrapersonal differences, so situational differences, things that make people behave in different ways, and trying to use that to compare individual people. And so that was one of the things that I pointed out when I was specifically doing. But everybody here has talked about, I think, critically social and health issues. And you obviously racist.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting that this is probably a good example to expand a little bit, because some of this has happened over a couple of blog posts, but there were several blog posts written in the last few weeks about the issue of race and intelligence and so on, by both Stephanie and I on 2 different blogs. And now this is a long discussion. What happens when you do that, when you write something like that on the internet, is people who have a particular point of view about race show up. And this could be a climate, global warming blog post, and people with global warming denial show up, whatever. They show up and they have a routine of things that they put on your blog as comments. And then the fights start. And it gets kind of interesting. And to me, okay, just to, if you were to look, if you didn't know, if somebody came to you and said, made some comment that made you wonder, is there a connection between race and IQ? And you went to Google and put race and IQ next to each other, you would find a lot of stuff. And I guess what the question that's urgent to me is, how do we fix the system, intervene, conspire, and this isn't leaving this room, I assume, so that when people do that, they find what we think they should read, rather than what the Aryan nation thinks they should read. This is not a matter of, doing the right thing. It's not a matter of science for science sake or knowledge. It's a culture war. It's a fight we're in. And it could be evolution and creationism. It could be global warming denialism. It could be race. But what are our tactics for helping people find what we think they should find, a bit paternalistically, and to help people who are looking? It's one thing when the science geeks show up and they want to know the science. That's easy. That's the easy part. The hard part is all the other people who sort of bump into a question and then they go to look for the answer to the question, and they find all kinds of stuff. And whether it's a policymaker who's a member of a school board or a county commission or a state legislator, or just a regular citizen, how do we guide them towards critically thought out, valid information that is useful, intelligible, understandable, and current?
It's about learning how to work the system. It's a big PR machine out there. It's public relations and it's marketing, and a lot of how Google search results work out. It has to do with link bait. It has to do with the search terms. It has to do with so many factors that can come into play. And if you know somebody who's an expert in search engine marketing, you can get your site more highly ranked for certain terms, for certain search terms. It's techniques like that. If you think Google it's the search engine that most people are using to look things up. Recently, I was looking at trying to find an expert to interview on vaccines. I went searching for vaccines, and everything that shows up is the anti-vax movement. And the first 3 to 4 pages, there was nothing reliable and nothing that had a reliable source in it. And I sat there and I looked at it, and I was like, why, when there's so much information coming out of well-vetted, reliable sources, research institutions that should have a greater basically ranking in Google based on the algorithms that they use, why aren't these other sites popping up in the top areas? So, and why aren't bloggers who are talking about this stuff, why isn't their work ending up on the top of the list? What's going on? And I think it all comes down to PR and marketing and the money that's being spent on it. And a lot of people who are trying to sell a certain herbal remedy or sell a particular mode of thought, they are spending money and they're taking time and they're hiring people who know how to work out of algorithmic systems to be able to rank things in a particular way. And we need to start working this in terms of personal internet reputation scores as well. That's why.
On a personal note, my aunt actually runs an online marketing firm, and she writes a blog on it includes such topics as how to improve your Google hit. So if anyone has good vaccine information and would like to solve this problem, I would direct you to a blog which might help.
Well, so my question here is, why do you even bother with Google? Why not go to the National Library of Medicine? Something that you know should be reputable.
People aren't searching there. The thing, I'm thinking about the majority of people. I think that's what you were mentioning as well, people going to Google. It's the majority of people don't think, oh, I'll go to the National Library of Medicine. And the majority of people probably don't even know it exists.
And that's a science education issue.
Yeah, it is, and it's something that I think, getting back to actually teaching our audience how to do this stuff, that we have to start with the assumption that they're going to do the naive search.
But we can't start with the assumption that they're stupid either.
No.
It's not
No.
a science.
Big difference between naive and stupid.
It's not a science education issue because we can include that in our science standards in every single year. And that how to search for scientific information, and we can test the students on it and grade them on it, and it will improve significantly the percentage of people that know what to do from like 3% to 3.5%. So it'll be a big jump, but it will not, in a sense, I mean, I tend to think that we should include that in our science education, but it's not going to solve, the problem. I think we have to, hijack Google. I did this, I was looking for something, a related issue, not a vaccine issue, but a medical health issue, information, and I went to Google and I found out that fluoride causes autism. And then I went to Google Scholar and I found all the current stuff on fluoride. So, I mean, it's not even, you have to go to some esoteric science site, you just have to go to Google Scholar. And even that should be the default, perhaps. We should somehow trick Google into thinking that should be the default.
Go to your librarian.
I think the next problem that we come up is that most of the stuff that's going to be coming back from the National Library of Medicine or Google Scholar is going to be uninterpretable by the majority of the public.
And inaccessible also.
Yeah.
Yes, it'll be behind the paywall. And so that's one of the things science bloggers are doing, is they're pulling things up from behind the paywall, translating it into ordinary English. And those things aren't going to be indexed under Google Scholar or the National Library of Medicine. And that's the stuff that we need to make more prominent.
Exactly. That's what we're trying to do.
But this is assuming that people are even Googling topics. Quite often that's not even the case. I did a show on homeopathy. And I had an email from a woman, and maybe I should go back. My show is, first of all, it's live on one radio station, and it's rebroadcast on a number of other radio stations. So this is definitely not necessarily a pro-science audience. And I did the episode on homeopathy, and I received an email from a woman who had been using homeopathy for years. And that's the first time that she had ever heard exactly how it was supposed to work. And she said she was throwing all of it away. So this is... But that's the thing, if she has been using it for years, she not once had the inclination to Google what she
But
was
a lot of
using.
It's
people,
possible she was reading books that were, just telling her how it worked.
I got the impression that somebody had told her to take it and she did it.
but it's still a very common response when you challenge somebody on something like homeopathy, because that's the first thing they do is they go to Google and say, well, I'm going to show you wrong. And yes, the first page or three of results are really useful for them.
The existential concept of throwing all your homeopathic medicine in the trash compactor is just there's a couple.
I found that the comment that you made interesting, something about how she just heard it from somebody or something like that. And you find that, of course, students and folks, that's how they get their information from other people. So I have no idea what the solution is, but you know, you're right, folks aren't going to Google necessarily, so they're not even maybe doing that naive search, and so how do we even get in there? How do we even get them to even start looking so that we can then game the system to get them